Yeah.
Oh, and another. Well, how's everybody doing?
Good. Nice.
Yes, everybody's good?
Yeah. I don't know if you can hear me or.
Yeah, absolutely.
Present and correct.
And now Rory's joining us and Fraser. There you are.
Hello, people.
Hi, Rory.
Hi, everyone.
Nice to see lots of
Nobody knows.
lots of fresh new faces. People we haven't seen. Some people that we already know. We'll just give it a little while, just to ensure that whoever's planning on coming is here. So feel free to admire our faces for a moment. And just for the moment, as we're going to be starting out by answering the questions that we've been given in advance, would everyone, if possible, just be able to click the mute button on your mics just for now, and then if we have a question amnesty at some point and we run out, then we'll get you to unmute yourselves. Otherwise, it can just cause a bit of interference.
Feel free as well to post any questions that suddenly spring to mind in the chat section. And that would be great.
I'll put the chat section up so I can see it. That helps.
Bottom of the screen in the middle, it's got that lovely button that says chat. And Sunita, I'm sure your hair is absolutely fine. So we have a few more just joining us at the moment from the waiting room, which is lovely.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi. Oh, and a couple more.
That's good.
So shall we get started, and I will keep an eye on the waiting room and admit people as they arrive.
Yep, that's all good. Message from Fraser. Hey Fraser, how you doing, buddy? So I've got my list of questions here. So shall we get started with the first one, and then while we're answering the questions, if you have another question that comes up that you think, oh, well, actually that leads on to that. What's this? Make a note of it, or pop it like Kate said, into the chat, and we will aim to answer as many as possible within this hour. And we are aiming to be here from 6 till 7 GMT, or British time. Someone messaged me earlier. Yeah, someone messaged me earlier saying, well, actually UK time is now different to GMT. Didn't realise that. So had to amend things. But yes, we should be here for the next hour or so. So any questions you have, make a note of them, pop them in the chat, and we will get to as many as we possibly can. So also, just to let you know as well, this whole Zoom session is going to be made available afterwards on our YouTube channel, on the Hypnosis Courses YouTube channel. It should be up tonight, potentially it could be tomorrow morning. However, whenever it is, we'll post it on the Hypnosis Courses page and in the Hypnotic Learners group. If you're not already a member of the Hypnotic Learners group, feel free to go on Facebook and join that, because that's where we post absolutely everything, and you get loads of awesome offers and stuff there. So for now, Kate, did you want to start with the first question?
I'll let you start. I'm still on the waiting room.
Oh, okay, cool. So the first question that we had was from Nick, and it is a little long, but it's fine. I will get it answered as soon as possible. In hypnotherapy training, I was taught that the subject cannot act against his will. Some sort of a critical faculty continues to monitor what's happening. To use an IT analogy, like a real-time antivirus program running in the background. This, for example, inhibits a subject who would like to stay alive from jumping off a high building. The fact that we're used to reassuring subjects in order to help maximize the effect of the intervention. So that we use that and we say that to people that they can't do anything against their will, just to clarify. Another example is that as hypnotherapists, we cannot compel a subject to, for instance, throw a bucket of water over his manager, but we can lead him to believe that his manager's hair is on fire. The question is, if the subject believed that his manager's hair was on fire and his manager was present and we placed a bucket of water in the subject's hands, what could the subject do in trance that he would not otherwise do? Lovely website, by the way. Oh, thanks. Did you want to start that one off, Kate?
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those interesting things that although hypnosis can have a slight disinhibiting effect, it's not going to change your personality, your underlying core values and beliefs. So if you're the sort of person whose manager is on fire and you'll go, oh, look, oh, that's exciting, and just watch, hopefully not, but if you are, then that's likely how you're going to be in hypnosis, and the other way around. If you think, oh, that's terrible, must deal with it and dive straight in and resolve the issue, that's what you're going to do. So it's not really going to make you any different a person.
Yeah, people think that they're automatically going to do things that they wouldn't normally do in hypnosis, but that's it. As Kate mentioned, if someone is a really good hypnotic subject and those suggestions are given to, imagine that your manager's head is on fire. It's a really random suggestion, but some people are so good at going into hypnosis and responding to suggestions that they might actually believe that's true, and with that in mind, they might chuck the water over the manager's head. It might be that the kind of person is more logical and analytical and thinks, well, although it seems real right now, it's highly unlikely that that is real, and I don't want to get fired for throwing water over my boss. So what do? So it could go either way. And as we know with people, people's moral compass and what people will do, like Kate said, in hypnosis, out of hypnosis, it tends to be fairly similar, on a sort of level. So with that in mind, if you're the sort of person, like I said, in hypnosis, out of hypnosis, to just do random things and not have a don't really care attitude, and then you'll probably be more like that in hypnosis as well. But it's commonly said that being in hypnosis reduces your inhibitions slightly to kind of the extent of having a glass or two of wine. So if you've got a friend who has a glass or two of wine and they're bouncing off the walls, then they may very well do the same thing in hypnosis. Whereas some people will have a glass or two of wine and be pretty much exactly the same as they are. So hopefully that kind of answers the question. Some people might be a little bit more outgoing, might do things a little more they wouldn't naturally do whilst in hypnosis. Other people, they'll just respond in the same way. So hopefully, Nick, that I don't know if you're here or not, that will answer your question. So he is. Hi, Nick. Did that answer your question? Feel free to comment and let us know. For now, though, we'll move on to the next question. Did you want to?
Oh, he has a follow-up.
If you have a follow-up, if you can type it quickly, feel free, Nick.
Or would you like to unmute your mic, Nick?
If you can unmute yourself, feel free.
Yes, thank you. Very quickly. So the crux seems to be whether the subject genuinely or believes in this particular case, which is Dr. Kate's example I remember some time ago. The crux is whether the subject genuinely believes that the manager's hair is on fire when it isn't. And it seems from what you say that they might. And in this case, are we telling them a white lie when we say that we cannot get you to throw a bucket of water over your manager's head when your manager's hair is not on fire? Is this a white lie? Is it somewhat disingenuous, but for a good reason?
It's a very good way of putting it.
It depends whether your reason is good for you or good for them.
Well, good for both of you, presumably, because they're paying you to help them, and I mean, yeah.
I would say you're not likely to be using such an example in the therapy room. However, for some people, those people that want hypnosis done to them and who believe that that is the only way it will possibly work, for them to believe that hypnosis is that powerful can engage their belief mechanism, which can actually help them initiate the change that they're seeking. So actually, for some people, it can be very helpful. For people
I would
think of hypnosis more as a collaborative process, it would be less helpful.
I would tend to keep it a little more broad and just generally say, you know, you're not going to do anything that you are morally opposed to doing, because that's generally true. You know, 99.99% of the time, people won't do something that they are actually properly opposed to. If you've seen any number of stage hypnosis shows, you'll know that's true, because you'll have seen some routines on stage fail due to that subject not wanting to do that because it's against what they believe. However, if the suggestions that you're giving are either in fun or to help that person, then generally they're going to want to go along with it anyway, you know. And people, you know, some people say, well, you know, they're up on stage and, you know, they're people are laughing at them. Why are they doing that? You know, because it's fun. You know, when you do stage hypnosis and things like that, the person on stage being hypnotized is having a great time. You know, regardless of what everyone thinks about how they're feeling, they're up there, they're participating, so they are having a good time, and that's why they're going with it. But if the hypnotist was to suggest something that wasn't fun or that was potentially harmful, then it's highly likely that they would reject that suggestion and either not respond or come out of hypnosis and punch the hypnotist.
Thank you.
Cool.
So, does that answer your question fully, Nick?
Yes, thank you, Dr. Gates and Rory.
Awesome. So, shall we go on to our next question? Shall I read this one, Rory?
I'll read it. You answer it. How about that?
Okay, go on.
So this is actually a question that's very similar. It's from two people. So Alana said, hello, I'd like to know how to do hypnotherapy online via Zoom. Do you have any tips? Also, Susie, can you give any top tips for working online with therapy clients?
And this will sort of also link into Lisa's question, very topical as well, which is about how you build trust with your client and rapport. So that's the first part of Lisa's question as well. So we have a very good blog, rather long one, on how to do hypnotherapy online and hypnosis online.
I was going to say
that's a good start.
We've done a couple of Zoom Q&As with our current batch of hypnotherapy diploma students. And all our past graduates, and it was a very common question as to, you know, how can you do hypnotherapy online and how can you do it safely and effectively. So we wrote a comprehensive blog on the subject. So when this goes onto YouTube, I'll put a link in the description. Whilst Kate talks now, I'll put a link into the group chat, so if you want to, you can copy it and find it straight away.
Perfect, thanks. So there's several things. First of all, is just as you would with any other hypnotherapy, keep within your competence, and in fact keep comfortably within your competence. If there's anything that you're a little bit concerned about, whether you think that you can do work with a certain client or not, it can be good to get supervision beforehand, even if it's just a really quick chat, and discuss which way that session might possibly go. And then there's the practical side of things. It can be really good to have a chat with your client before the therapy session. That way you get to test out their equipment, see whether their Zoom or Skype is effective, whether there's any irritating background noises, you know, setting up an alternate means of contact, and get all of the admin out of the way. By doing that, you're also building a connection, you're building rapport, because you're showing the client that you actually care about them. You want the session that's coming up to go really, really well. So all of that, the preparation side of it is really, really useful. If you're going to have any forms completed by your client, make sure that they're all completed and back to you before the session. So you're not really taking the admin questions as you go through. All of the prep leads up to a really, really good session. As I say, I think the first point is to definitely read the blog, and then to work through a normal session with a client, being aware there are certain limitations. You can hardly reach through the screen and do some rocking or lift a hand up, but you can be creative, you can think around it. You know, you might just say to the client, I'd just like you to gently rock yourself from side to side, and get them to do a rocking deepener instead of you doing it. So there are ways around it with a bit of thought.
There are some therapy techniques, there are some inductions and deepeners that obviously are physical in nature, so won't likely work as well online. That there are those, you know, so if you know any rapid inductions, there's the magnetic hands where you get them to bring their hands together, then in the middle you push them down and shock them. That's not going to work online because you can't push the hands down. However, you could instead still do the same thing and then say when their hands touch, they could drop down into their lap and they can go into hypnosis. So the non-shock, completely verbal version of that induction works. Similarly, I mean, if you're following kind of the standard process of therapy, you're going to go from like a more behavioral and cognitive approach first and foremost, through to more analytical stuff, and then maybe regression, that kind of thing, right at the end as your last resort. And when working with people online, to avoid ab reactions, it's the same way as working with a client in person. Is you use the least intrusive approaches possible. You know, if you sat on an online session straight away and it's for weight loss, and you're like, okay, right, let's regress you back to your childhood to find out why you put on all that weight. That's not necessarily going to be the most effective approach for that person, and you could probably do it in a less intrusive way, you know, working through their habits and their behaviors and their thoughts and their beliefs about what they're doing, and, you know, gradually building up into it. I mean, if you need to do some regression at the end of the day, then by all means, that's fine. But generally keep it kind of a staged process and only do what you really need to do. And I mean, that's how you best avoid any ab reactions, unwanted reactions during the online hypnotherapy session, just as you would in person.
One of the things as well that can be worth thinking about is that online work can actually, for some clients, be harder. It's more intensive. Often people say they feel like they have to focus more because it's online. At the moment, with people working from home as well, if they're using online for work, they're used to having to pay attention. Now that's great in that people will pay attention with your therapy sessions. However, it can also mean that your client could get more tired more quickly. So avoid overworking your client. It can be good to do maybe 2 shorter sessions in a week rather than throw everything at them and then come out of that session thinking, oh, you know, I don't know what to think. I'm exhausted. So keeping in, almost wanting more, but feeling as though they've had something very useful, keeping them engaged can be more effective with a shorter session and then another one sooner, rather than, as I say, having these longer sessions. I'm hearing of some therapists that are saying, oh, but it's online, so I'm doing 90 minutes or 2 hours. That's a lot of focus. So keeping it to sort of not bite-sized chunks, but a manageable size for the client could be more effective.
Just because you're not seeing them in person doesn't mean that you can't see them again, you know. And if you normally do more than one session for a client, do the same thing online. Why wouldn't you? A couple of useful points to consider as well. If you're thinking about doing online therapy, or if you haven't, if you already started doing it, check with your insurance that you're covered to do online therapy, whether that's covered for you in your country, your specific area or state. And if you're potentially working with people from other countries and other states, you might want to check whether you're covered to work with them as well. And also consider as well, I mean, it's not the hypnotherapy side of it, but the, you know, getting clients side of it. If you're marketing your sessions and your website's all geared up to sell live face-to-face hypnotherapy sessions, that's not necessarily going to give the right impression to the client who's looking to book you for an online session. So you might want to have add some information in there about, you know, your online sessions, how effective they can be, how you don't need to be seen in person in order to make positive changes with hypnotherapy, all that kind of stuff. So the client actually, you know, you're selling to the client basically at that point, rather than just kind of hoping that your standard hypnotherapy in-person website does the job for you.
Absolutely. And you may well find that some of the clients that you start to see now online want to carry on online, even though further on they may have the opportunity to come and see you in person, whereas other clients will want to swap over to seeing you in person.
As Kate mentioned, there are tons of different online services you can use if you're not already doing it to automate your process. You can set your website up so that you have forms on there for collecting people's information. There are some free and paid services that you can use to do that. There's various different types of online video conferencing software like this, like Zoom that we're on right now. There's old faithful Skype. There's also, I think, the Windows Teams. That's a new one as well. Some people even do it over WhatsApp or Facebook Messenger, so Facebook video calls, and even over the phone. You go old school and do it over the phone if you want to. You don't necessarily need to see the person that you're working with. If someone has limitations, they can't do any kind of video chat. So you've got tons of options there. But definitely have a look through that blog post. I just posted the link over there on the chat if you can find it. If not, I can post it up. If anyone asks, I'll post you the link. But yeah, there's tons and tons of information there. But as we're here, as we're all indoors in lockdown, there's no reason that you can't keep helping people and doing it on Zoom and doing it online. If you're comfortable doing that, or if you're comfortable learning how to become comfortable doing that, then there's no reason why you can't do that. Hopefully that answers those questions.
Absolutely. So do you want to go on to the next one?
Yeah, let's find one. So Denton asks, my most commonly used rapid induction utilizes touching the client lightly in some way, for example, lifting the client's arm into position before doing an arm catalepsy test. What do you find are effective workarounds for something like that when you can't physically touch a client for whatever reason? I mean, we kind of mentioned that just now, but I like the addition of for whatever reason, because it clarifies when it's not just being online, not being face to face. That's a reason that you can't touch clients. Some clients don't want to be touched. If you go to try and take a client's arm and they go, yeah, at that point, that's a big indicator that you're probably going to be best not touching them due to whatever's happened with them. But there are always workarounds. If you're in the example that Denton gave, using an arm for an arm catalepsy test, you'd have their arm would be there, and you say, I'm going to take your arm, I'm going to plop it up in the air. You can just allow that arm to just float there by itself, that kind of thing. So using the arm gently just to hold it there until you get catalepsy. You can do the very same thing with words. You can take your, so as you're going to pop your arm out, raise up just so it's right there sitting in front of your face. And I want you to allow all the weight of that arm to just go. I want your arm to just be able to sit there all by itself. I want you to notice how strange it begins to feel as your arm begins to just float in the air all by itself. And just by doing that, you've gotten around needing to touch them for that reason. Obviously, yes, there are some inductions, there are some processes that do benefit from touching, but if you're creative and logical, generally you can find a way around most of them.
Absolutely. And if you're planning to do that, it can be good in your pre-talk, in your setup at the start of the session, to say to somebody, it may be that at some point during the session, I'm going to ask you just to place your hand in the air. Would that be comfortable? So you're still checking for contraindications. You're checking that there are no shoulder injuries or anything like that. But you're also priming them so that they know that may well be coming up. And that can be a good way of getting psychological buy-in to that as well.
Going back to Lisa's question. So I think did you cover building trust and rapport? I think you kind of did.
Partly, about having the set up before the main session.
Yeah. So how do you build client trust and rapport? Having that set up before the main session. With anything, it's generally, as with anything, it's generally down to how you come across to the client. Whether you come across as professional, whether you come across as actually knowing what you're talking about, or if the fact that you're now doing your session online and you're not necessarily used to it, that you're a bit flustered and you're clicking around and you're absent-minded because you're trying to run this process and that process at the same time. That's stuff that you want to get out of the way beforehand. You want to get practice doing the mundane, starting the programs and sending links and muting micro, all that kind of technical stuff, that doesn't want to interfere with your session. So practice first. Do some Zoom sessions with your friends and family. Put your phone in the other room, watching the TV if you're just on your own, and then go on your computer and do a Zoom session with your phone. There are ways around it, but it's all about coming across as knowing what you're talking about, and whether that's in person or online, the same thing works.
One of the key things I would find is be interested. And that's the key thing, to have your focus on them for that time in that session. It can be easy to think, well, my hands aren't being seen, so I can carry on making notes and doing this and doing that. And I heard of a therapist the other day who was petting their dog during the therapy session, and the client only realised during the chat when the dog started barking. And the therapist's like, oh, here, have a chat with Tommy. It's like, that's great if it's your friend, maybe not as great if your client's trying to work on anxiety or a phobia or something like that. So I would suggest treating it exactly like any other therapy session, building that rapport, showing that you're interested. And if you're not that interested, find something about them to be interested, because people can tell whether you're engaged or you're not engaged. So just taking that little bit of time to make that effort will pay off in the success of the therapy.
Yeah. As with most hypnotherapy, if you actually give a shit, people can pick up on that. So it definitely does help. Another part of Lisa's question, the second part, what convincers and suggestibility tests are best for the online environment? The majority of them tend to work absolutely fine, whether you're doing, movement-based ones, catalepsy ones, imagination-based ones. All of those can be done verbally by you. So the majority of them will work great. I mean, you're probably not going to do like the postural sway suggestibility test where you get them to fall backwards. That's not going to work great. But yeah, the majority, so you've got like magnetic fingers and magnetic hands, and the heavy and light hands test, and hand lock test as well, and arm catalepsy, and the lemon visualization test, and just eye catalepsy. All of those can work fantastically online. With anything that you're kind of looking for feedback from the person you're working with, you just need to be able to make sure that you can see what you need to see. Because, for instance, if we were here and you were doing the arm, so the heavy and light hand suggestibility test with me, one arm goes up, one arm goes down. If my camera's here and I'm doing it now, so there you go. So you can't really see very much of what's going on. So you would need to get that person to position themselves in a way that you could see what they're doing with their arms, or you could see what they're doing with their fingers or their eyes or whatever it is. So that's just the one factor really that I think you need to keep in mind with any of
There are a range of, I think it's on our suggestibility online course, there's also a range of research suggestibility tests that lend themselves very well to use via Zoom, because they're predominantly suggestion based. The wonderful thing about that is that you could engage with those with a client, get some feedback, and they learn something about themselves as well. So it's an added value type process.
Suggestibility. I mean, if you're a hypnotherapist and you're not doing suggestibility tests already, then we think as trainers that you're probably missing out on vital information and a very useful part of the therapy process, a very useful addition, because not only do you get information about how suggestible that client is at that time, but it's also a really nice warm-up for that client to gradually get them into the process, rather than just go, right, okay, now here, sit down, get into hypnosis. That can be a bit much for some people. I mean, for other people it works fine. But
and suggestibility tests help you avoid one of those biggest issues that hypnotherapists have, is that clients can sometimes get to the end of a session and go, oh, well, it was all very nice, dear, but I wasn't hypnotized. And it's either because your pre-talk didn't address the myths and they were expecting to be unconscious or blacked out or not be able to hear you or something like that, or because they hadn't been introduced to hypnotic phenomena. So suggestibility tests and convincers use hypnotic phenomena. So when you explain the process to the client and they understand how well they've done, then they'll be able to engage with the fact that they can do this hypnosis thing, and they'll engage more with the whole process.
It's also a really good way of figuring out what you can and might not do with your client. That's why pretty much all stage hypnotists use suggestibility tests, because they want to pick the people who do respond in a certain way on stage, so it makes for a good show. Similarly, you might end up doing the same thing for a client and seeing, are they able to move whilst they're in hypnosis? Do the suggestions that you give cause them to move parts of their body? If so, that's fantastic. You can tie some stuff in with the suggestions you're giving. If not, don't include it, because if that fails and they don't move when you ask them to, then that might lead the client to think, oh, well, that didn't work, so what else isn't going to work? So all in all, suggestibility testing as a therapist is definitely something that we would recommend doing. As Kate mentioned, it is our Suggestibility Test 101 online course is like 6-7 hours of video training, pretty much every single suggestibility test that you can think of, and also including the Stanford scale, the Harvard scale, and the two Barbers research scales as well. Really, really cool.
Can you put the link up for that as well?
I can do that too. And yeah, again, if you haven't noticed already, which you probably have, but due to the lockdown, all of our online courses for the duration of the lockdown are 50% off using the code STAY INDOORS. So if you want to buy any of those courses, now's a good time to do it, because you get half price.
The other thing that suggestibility tests do give you, and this is another big issue with whether a client thinks hypnosis has worked or not, is they help you work out whether they're more visual or more auditory or more kinesthetic. If you are naturally, as a hypnotist, more of a visual person yourself, and you create a wonderful experience with moving oceans or greenery and country imagery, and they're not at all visual, they'll come out of that session going, oh, well, it sounded nice, but I couldn't connect to what they're talking about. In contrast, if you've got somebody that's not at all kinesthetic and you're talking about feeling relaxed, they may not understand what you're talking about at all. So suggestibility tests really in the whole process help you get that really valuable information, which you can then use to inform you all the way through the therapy session and even into their homework.
We like suggestibility tests, if you haven't realised.
And convincers.
Final part of Lisa's three-part question.
Point on that as well. We use, out of the hypnotherapy environment, we use the word test. A lot of hypnosis trainers say, oh, no, you mustn't do suggestibility tests because you're testing the client. And if it doesn't work, the client will think they've failed. Don't call them a suggestibility test to your client. Call them a warm-up activity. Call them an imagination exercise. And whatever information you get, even if they don't do what you expect them to do, praise them for it. Say, excellent, that's really useful information that will help guide our session to make it even more effective for you.
The client doesn't know what you know. They don't know why you're doing these things. So if you frame it as something that's positive, whatever the result, then you're going to get a more positive response. So it's a really nice little linguistic trick to make it more effective. Final part of Lisa's question, and probably the most important, it says, how do you manage ab reactions during online sessions if you're not there in the room with the client to check that they're okay and all is well? Do you want to do that?
Well, I think, should we both?
Yeah.
We start with our usual. It really starts with the setup. So setting up in your pre-talk that the client is always in control, that they will be able to move if they want to, that they will be able to talk to you if they want to. You might even say that they can open their eyes at any point if they want to. However, having their eyes closed helps the hypnosis be more effective. So you're setting them up that they're not going to be constrained or restricted. Then, as you work through the hypnosis process, you're not stupid. So you're going to follow the standard care that you're going to have in a therapy environment. You're not going to dive back into something sort of regression halfway through the first 10 minutes of a first session. You'll take a more behavioural, more cognitive, more analytical, gentle progression towards their goals. If there is an adverse reaction, something that isn't what you expect, you deal with it as you would in the therapy room with your words.
The key benefit I find of doing online sessions versus doing face-to-face sessions with ab reactions, which ab reactions don't happen. If you're doing things with common sense, if you're working the way that you logically should be working, most people won't have an ab reaction. Some people will have a reaction, and some people may cry, and they may be bawling their eyes out. Not necessarily an ab reaction, and that's fine. That's a part of the therapy process. It's the completely weird off-the-wall ones that we're kind of talking about here. They really don't happen that often if you're working safely, if you're working, with a bit of logic. One of the key things especially for those inexperienced therapists out there working online, the benefit is that when someone does have an ab reaction, your natural human response is, oh, it's okay, and you pat them on the shoulder and that kind of thing. And you can't do that while you're online. So that's a benefit there. But as Kate says, you would treat it just the same way as you would during a therapy session, face to face. You would calm them down verbally. You get their attention with your voice. You get them to calm. You get them to focus on their breathing and reorient themselves back to the room and check that they're okay and whether they want to continue or not. And you can do all of that verbally, just the same as you would.
If you know that you're going to be working on anything sensitive, you can always set up a safe place, as well as a place of relaxation. So you've got options where you would take somebody. And that's something that if you are working with a difficult client, always good to get supervision first so that you can discuss how you might deal with a difficult situation.
Yeah. If your trainers or the people that you've learned from don't offer supervision, there are tons and tons of other people out there. Like Kate does supervision as well, online or in person, but there are many, many, many different supervisors, and it's definitely worth, if you're unsure of how to work, batting your ideas off another person, someone who's probably seen that kind of client before, so they can inform you how to best and most safely work with them moving forwards. Next one, a really brief question from Sarah. My 16-year-old daughter is interested in hypnosis and hypnotherapy. I know she's not old enough to participate in any courses yet, which is a shame, as this long summer with no exams is begging to be utilized wisely. Could she study your online courses, or do you have any other suggestions how to get started without getting into bad habits? I mean, like for us with our courses, live courses, then we say, anyone over 16 in the UK, which is adult age, with supervision from a parent or guardian, that's fine. And then kind of 18 onwards, come on your own. But in terms of online courses, there is no age limit necessarily. So it's just about whether whoever it is, whether it's Sarah's daughter or someone else, that they can understand that information and use it correctly and safely and ethically. And if they're mature enough to be able to do that, then that's absolutely fine. Other great way to get started is with books. There are so many books out there. So if that young person likes to read, and some young people still do like to do that, then there are many, many different books out there. That was just a really quick one. Hopefully that answers the question, Sarah. We've kind of answered Matthias's question, which was what are the convincers and deepeners? We didn't answer that bit, the deepeners that you find most effective. Would you like to have a go at deepeners, Kate, briefly?
I think pretty much most of the deepeners, I would suggest as a deepener, generally avoid the physical ones that you would normally be involved in. However, I have used rocking with quite a big group in an audience at a conference, and that worked really, really well. So they seem to like that. It just makes sure that they can actually rock from side to side quite safely and quite comfortably on whatever they're sitting on, maybe not perched on a kitchen stool. So that can be quite good. But the countdown ones, any particular normal deepeners that you use are just as effective generally over Zoom or Skype as they are in person.
It's true, yeah. Counting and visualizations and progressive relaxation, tension relaxation, you know, all those kind of things. They work great. So hopefully that answers the question along with the other part. From Sunita, this isn't about the about online hypnosis or anything like that. It's actually about our diploma course. Been trained by another doctor in hypnosis, but the course wasn't based in the UK. I wish to at some point do your diploma course. I believe that we'd be able to work in the USA once qualified, and would I be able to work as a hypnotherapist worldwide, physically and online? It depends on the country. When you do your hypnotherapy training, wherever you're based, always look into the legislation of the country that you're intending to work in, because, you know, different countries and different states will have different legislation. You know, some countries you're not allowed to do. I think Israel and Norway, you're not allowed to do hypnotherapy unless you're a medical doctor or a psychologist. You know, I think where is it? Hungary, you're not allowed to be a stage hypnotist. I think it's Hungary. I'm not entirely sure. Or Belgium, one of the two. But yeah, it can vary state by state. However, when you're looking for a hypnotherapy course, you know, if you're new to it, or if you've read a couple of books, done a couple of short courses, and you're looking to get a full training, just ensure that there are a couple of things. A, that the trainers that you are actually going to be working with know what they're talking about, and that they have experience actually doing hypnosis, because there are lots of trainers who do a hypnotherapy course, then start their own hypnotherapy course the day after. And there are tons of those out there. Not us, no, definitely not. She's got the most extensive hypnotherapy CV of anyone I've ever seen, and I've met quite a few hypnotherapists out there. It's pages and pages and pages and pages. So make sure the teachers, the trainers know what they're talking about. Go for a broad course, but one that is in depth. So there are schools out there that will just teach Ericksonian hypnotherapy, and Ericksonian hypnotherapy is great, but it's not the be-all and end-all when it comes to hypnotherapy. There are lots of different areas that you can specialize in. You've got behavioral hypnotherapy and cognitive analytical hypnotherapy. You've got various different other psychotherapies that can come into being used in hypnotherapy. So you've got, you know, CBT and REBT and mindfulness and ACT and NLP. And if you can get a broad range of information about those things and know how to put them into place alongside hypnotherapy, it's going to make you an amazingly strong therapist. And that's why we teach on our diploma course how to do some non-hypnotherapy work, because sometimes you get clients who aren't necessarily ready to have a proper hypnotherapy session and might benefit from some more talking therapy. So it's really nice to be well-rounded where at all possible. But yeah, if you're based in the UK, I'm not sure, Sunita, if you are or not, but yeah, the standard for hypnotherapy training is the core curriculum for hypnotherapy, which is based on national occupational standards. There are loads and loads of bullet points of things that need to be covered in order to meet those standards, and to get NHS referrals, so to be referred to by doctors and dentists and that kind of thing, your training needs to at least meet those standards, because that's what is being pushed for in the UK. Wow, I talk a lot, don't I?
Yeah, generally on that, one of the courses that we offer certification for is the National Guild of Hypnotists course. If you're planning to work internationally, that's actually a really good qualification to have. Not only do they have vast connections around the world, there are very few places where they haven't got at least one member. They also have a phenomenal database of the local legislation and rules. So for example, if you want to work in some states in America, instead of having certification calling yourself a hypnotherapist, you would use the title clinical hypnotist or consulting clinical hypnotist. And that enables you to work in that environment. So some states, for example, don't like the word hypnotherapist unless you're a certified counsellor, but you can use the word hypnotist. And that's similar in other countries as well. So having an international qualification, if you're planning to work abroad, can be very useful. One of my graduates decided he wanted to take a year out and go traveling. And he was able to do that partly because his certification was internationally based.
Yeah, it's something that we offer. You know, our qualification. I just saw a question there from Claire. What qualification comes with your course? Our qualification is a hypnotherapy diploma. There's no regulation in the UK about what you can call a hypnotherapy qualification. You know, someone might have amazing master wizard hypnotherapist qualification, it doesn't mean anything different to just a hypnotherapy certificate or a hypnotherapy diploma, or whatever that title is. The key thing, the most important thing, is that your training is a good enough quality that you can go out and you can help people safely and ethically. So it's up to you to do that research. We've had people come on our courses who've done spreadsheets of all the different things covered on different courses, and that's what you need. You need to look at what's out there and choose the best option for you, and you might find that you come and train with us.
Yes, it's one of our students came from Japan, and she showed me her Excel spreadsheet that was enormous, and she covered the UK, Europe, and I think the States as well. Not Australia, but pretty thorough.
Yeah.
So she did her due diligence.
Let's move on, because we've got loads of questions coming in as well. Fatima, a question was, I wondered if you have ever helped anyone who's interrupted sleep patterns, who suffers also with tinnitus. Any thoughts on that would be appreciated. Feel free.
So hypnotherapy can work really, really well with both sleep issues and with tinnitus. Generally, hypnotherapy for tinnitus tends to be about learning to accept the sound, but you can also use some distortion techniques as well. So you can adjust the perception of how it sounds, so you can distort that, and you can also work with the emotional perception of the tinnitus, because sometimes we can spend so much energy fighting against something, it can be very tiring. Whereas if you accept it and move forward with that acceptance, you're actually creating a whole lot more energy that's available to focus on something else.
So we wouldn't categorically say that, yes, hypnotherapy will always help with tinnitus, because it won't always. But there are ways that you can help people, that you can alleviate some of the symptoms, some of the negative emotions. For some people, changing their sleeping behavior, their sleeping pattern, getting them to sleep in a slightly different way, or getting them to reduce a certain type of food or drink that they have that causes that to happen, that can alleviate it. So by default, you can then help people with their tinnitus. Also with tinnitus, no, that I was thinking of something completely different then. So yeah.
Sleep hygiene is a massive one, and at the moment, quite a few of my clients are saying that they've had to really be quite strict with themselves, because first, starting off with the lockdown, people were staying up late, they were getting out of bed late, their routines had changed.
Drinking for breakfast, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, people normally do drink for breakfast, tea, coffee, water. But it's about creating and establishing a really effective routine. So maybe not taking your mobile phone to bed with you and playing games just before you try to go to sleep. Having a wind down time. Just as you would if you were going off to work, you would come home, you'd do your evening chores, you'd wind down before bed, getting back into things that actually work for you. And some of it is maybe about saying to yourself, let's work out a schedule for during the week. Maybe relax that schedule at weekends. By doing so, especially now, it can help people to transition back to going back to a semi-normal life. Already I'm having clients that are anticipating that and getting a little bit stressed about going back to their normal life. So creating a routine now as a transition point can be very useful.
Yeah, definitely. So hopefully that helps as well. Final question that we had submitted was from Paddy. Your online Hypnotherapy 101 course, is that a video version of Rory's Beginner's Guide to Hypnotherapy book? No, it is not. There may be some similar things there are some similar things within the online Hypnotherapy 101 course and my Beginner's Guide to Hypnotherapy book, but that book was written about 4 or 5 years ago. As a good hypnotherapy trainer, as a good hypnotherapist, I've been learning since then, So that's the brand new Hypnotherapy 101 course that came out last year. That's got lots of new stuff in there as well. But again, you know, it's good because some people like to read, some people prefer to watch. So there's something, you know, out there for everyone in terms of how to learn hypnotherapy. Also with the online Hypnotherapy 101 course, it comes with a really comprehensive course manual as well for those who like to read and watch at the same time.
Yeah, I wrote it. That's a very comprehensive manual.
Yeah. So that's those questions. Let's now scroll back up to the top of chat and see what questions we have in the chat here.
I think this is our first.
Frasers, feel free.
So, follow-up question to Nick's, I think, maybe. I'm currently studying my clinical hypnotherapy diploma. What are your thoughts on physical contact during these sessions for inductions and deepeners? Coming from a stage background, I find it difficult to not have touch coming from Roy's rapid inductions. That's my bread and butter. But my mentor thinks having touch could be a health and safety risk in case allocations of touch. I think you probably mean anchoring there. I'm still a fan of touch, but wanted your personal opinion on touch for deepeners and inductions. And if so, is videoing your hypnotherapy sessions to cover your back? So a couple of points there, really. One about videoing, and one about touching.
So lots of hypnotherapists get a bit antsy about touching clients. Generally, this comes from where they're trained. And if you're trained not to touch your clients, then as a hypnotherapist, you're probably not going to touch your clients. Coming, as Fraser has said, from a stage hypnosis, from a rapid inductions background, which is where you're kind of, you know, you're getting involved with your client, you're taking their arms, you're moving them around, you're, you know, shifting them left and right, you know, all those kind of things, which is absolutely fine and absolutely normal. I have seen people who've gone from that world to hypnotherapy and who probably should have taken it a little more gently, and they just assume that people will respond the same way as they do kind of on stage hypnosis shows and be fine with like being touched and being like manhandled and that kind of stuff. Not manhandled in a bad way, but you know, just being a little bit more touchy than other people would. Touching clients is absolutely fine. Touching clients appropriately is absolutely fine. Inappropriately, not so much. But if you specify, if you're worried, if you're nervous about, you know, whether a client's going to be okay with being touched during the session for whatever it is that you're doing, then ask them first, you know. So during this session, for some of the techniques I'm going to use, I may touch your shoulder, I may pick up your hand. Are you happy for me to do that? If they say yes, do it. If they say no, don't do it. It's pretty much common sense there. Carry on.
Just on the point of the I think when you're talking about allocations of touch, I think you might mean anchoring. You can anchor an emotion or a word or anything else with touch. So if, for example, you were in the therapy room and you were giving suggestions for relaxation so that every time you touch them on their shoulder, they would relax even deeper, you're creating an association with that touch to that shoulder. Of course, if you're going to do that, you would most generally ring fence it to the therapy environment. So only when I touch you on your shoulder, so that then they don't go onto the tube the next morning or their partner doesn't touch them on the shoulder and they just relax. So you would use normal safety precautions with that anchoring. If somebody is in a heightened emotional state, say they're distressed for whatever reason, one of the reasons why you don't touch people when they're abreacting is you could anchor that heightened emotional state with that touch. You could. It's not guaranteed, but you could. So generally, that's one of the reasons why we say if they're abreacting, you wouldn't touch.
Generally for touching, a really easy way around it, you know, if you want to do like an arm pull induction or a hand drop deepener or something like that, instead of just grabbing it, you know, say I'm just going to take your arm, say, can I have that arm please? And if they give you their arm, then that's that's consent at that point. So that's absolutely fine. If they walk into the session and you put your hand out to shake their hand and they shake your hand, well, you've already touched at that point. So that's pretty much a non-verbal consent that they're okay being touched. You might get some clients who go, "Oh no, I'm not shaking your hand." At that point, that's a big flag. So you don't touch that client. He said about videoing.
Can I come back onto this?
Yeah.
Just also on that point, if you are going to be touching somebody, even if it's just their wrist, their arm, say so in your pre-talk, and say at some point during the session, I may touch your wrist, your arm, your shoulder. Would that be okay? Because you don't know, they might have sunburn on their shoulder or something. So that can be really good to mention.
And be very aware of how you deliver that suggestion. At
Yes.
some point during this session, I'm going to touch you.
yeah, appropriateness of tonality is a good one. And the other thing that you can do is, because you don't know if somebody has had poor experiences with being touched as well, whenever anybody has their eyes closed, it can be good to say, I'm just going to touch your wrist just before you do that. Or even maybe if you're going to touch their right wrist, I'm just going to touch the back of your right wrist. And just let them know. That way they're not going to jump, they're not going to bring themselves out of hypnosis. It's going to be something that's anticipated. You've already told them beforehand, got their consent, and that minimizes any risk of disturbance, really. So pre-talk, check that they're okay with being touched, warn before you touch them if they've got their eyes closed. All of those are really useful.
In terms of videoing, we generally would say you don't tend to need to video record your sessions. One simple fact is that you're going to have hours and hours and hours and gigabytes of video footage, which you then have to pay to store. Also now with GDPR, people can request their information. So if you have videos of their sessions, then you would have to give those videos of the sessions to that client as well. The only time that we personally would suggest to record your sessions if you're working with a vulnerable client. So whether that's a child or someone who is not able to make their own decisions, not compos mentis, then that's when you probably should. Otherwise, generally, so long as you're working safely, so long as you're being ethical in the way that you work, you really shouldn't need to record it.
Cool.
I think Fraser may have been trying to say something then, but I could not hear. It was really, yeah,
No,
loads of interference, unfortunately. If you have any more comments, Fraser, stick them in the comments and we'll try and get to them before this time is up.
Okay, we've had one from, where are we?
We covered the ab reaction.
We have done that.
If it's a serious ab reaction, I mean, most ab reactions to the person who's experienced it will tend to be fairly serious. If it's a super serious one, you could include some stage dissociation into your ab reaction. So scene fades, focus on your breathing. You could also get them to imagine coming out of their body away from the scene that they're experiencing, and do that a couple of times. It's a more advanced technique. It's one that you really don't need to use very often. But
if you don't know that at all, if you haven't covered stage dissociation at all, then cover it in supervision before you think about using it, just to make sure that you've got all of the different aspects of it. Shall we go on to
the NAS? Yes. Why is it that some people can't get hypnotized even though they want to be?
Part of that is hypnosis is a subconscious process. And if you're really fighting consciously to go into hypnosis, it's like lying in bed going, I've got to go to sleep, I've got to go to sleep, I've got to go to sleep. You're actually keeping yourself away from sleep. So allowing yourself to relax into the process, and whatever happens will actually enable you to allow your brain waves to slow, allow yourself to mentally relax, and allow yourself to go into hypnosis. Saying that, sometimes people are expecting something that isn't hypnosis to happen. So they may well be in hypnosis, but they're expecting to be blacked out, for there to be, floating sensations or whatever it is. So I would say really thoroughly research what it's likely to feel like before you work on being hypnotized. So you have a really good understanding of what hypnosis is, and even more importantly, what it isn't.
Yeah. Again, on that subject, it's a question we get a lot. We have written another blog on that subject. I'll find it in a few seconds, and I'll post that link down there, which will be really good reading for you. Another thing to, just from my own personal perspective, Kate's a really good subject. I'm not a very good subject personally. I wouldn't invite myself up on stage for a stage hypnosis show because I wouldn't do all the stuff that the really good subjects do. And that's just how it is for some people. Some people are just naturally not super high level, somnambulistic, high responding subjects, and they won't be able to do that stuff. However, the majority of people can be hypnotized to some degree. Most people, nearly all people, can be hypnotized to a level where they can benefit from hypnotherapy. It's commonly said like the top kind of 20 to 30% of all people are good enough subjects to come up on stage and do the stage hypnosis show stuff, which kind of means like between 60 to 70% of people aren't as good a subject. So that's something else to bear in mind. I would love to be able to go up on stage and be humiliated by him. No, not really. And have fun with a stage hypnotist, and do all that stuff, hallucinate and amnesia and all that stuff. But I can only do I can do a bit of catalepsy. I've almost done amnesia once or twice. Oh, actually, no, you've done amnesia with me, and that worked quite well. Okay, I'll take it back. But you can also. It also can depend on the hypnotist that you're working with. If you don't have rapport with that hypnotist, you're not going to let yourself go into hypnosis, because after all hypnosis is self-hypnosis at the end of the day. You're doing all of this in your own head. So if you're not comfortable letting it happen, you're not going to let it happen. So many, many, many different reasons why someone might not go into hypnosis or might not go so deeply into hypnosis. Hopefully that helps.
That's absolutely true. Let's move on to Kazia's, because that's a similar one as well. I can see you still there. Well done. And it's that Kazia was raised with a fear of hypnosis and thinks her unconscious is still afraid of it. And what can she do about it? I would say do your research. Read up on hypnosis. There's lots of information on YouTube, so you get to understand it intellectually, consciously, and then start to explore. Maybe listen to one of the hypnosis recordings. We've got a nice relaxation one on HypnoTC's YouTube channel. And listen to that and just explore what it is you're feeling, how you're reacting, and just allow yourself to gently find out a little bit more each time. And what you'll find is that you'll work at a speed that's right for you, and you'll start to develop your own confidence in your own ability to go into hypnosis. Because as Rory's just said, all hypnosis is self-hypnosis. You're doing it to yourself. If you're working with a hypnotist, they're guiding you, but they're not making you go into hypnosis. It's you that's allowing that process to happen. So putting yourself in the driving seat and finding out about it, and then allowing yourself to explore it, is the best way, I find.
Definitely. Cool.
So,
we've covered Claire's question, Sunita's question. Fraser, should I register with the GHR or CNHC? So these are regulatory, these are associations in the UK. It will depend on whether your training allows you to register with them and the benefits that you get with them. Some of them will allow you to join one of their professional registers, meaning that you can potentially get more business from it. You need to join one of those associations in order to join the CNHC, because that then proves your training has met that standard. And as I mentioned earlier, the CNHC, you need to be a member in order to take referrals from medical professionals in the UK.
The General Hypnotherapy Register, the GHR, is a professional association. So they're designed really to support members and to promote hypnotherapy. The CNHC, which is a Complementary and Natural Healthcare Council, are the voluntary regulator for hypnotherapy in the UK. And their main role is actually to protect the public. So they maintain a register of suitably qualified therapists that meet the standard. So it's good to be on that register because it shows that your training is to a standard that is accepted as a practitioner level. Do we have another question? I think, yes, there's a couple more there.
We got Ross. Ross said the Hypnotherapy 101 course is definitely worth the money. Thanks, Ross. Cheers for that. Fraser said, sorry, it meant allegations, as if they meant allegation touching them. So would videoing it be good insurance? I mean, you're hopefully unlikely to get yourself into that situation, and by pre-screening your clients, any issues or disturbances or anything like that would come out. If you have any, if you think someone is kind of a potential, they're not necessarily stable, if you're getting red flags at that point, it's always up to you whether you work with someone or not. You don't have to work with every single client that sends you an inquiry. If you don't feel comfortable with that client, if you think, yeah, they're ringing warning bells in my head, then feel free to refer them on to a different therapist. Say, I don't think I'm the therapist for you. Sorry about that, and go to this register and have a look through the other ones.
The other thing that you can do, as opposed to videoing the client, is to video yourself. Because if you're videoing yourself sitting in a chair, then that is the video that's being taken, and that would demonstrate that you weren't leaving your chair for whatever reason.
Yeah. But even
However,
then, there's so much storage, and you have to keep it for 7+ years. And if you're seeing lots of clients a week, that's going to mount up in terms of storage, even like cloud storage. So yeah, generally we'd say no. Just act with respect for your clients. Act as you should as a professional therapist, and most of the time you should be fine. I haven't had an issue personally, and I'm touching clients all day long. I have posted, going back to the other question, I posted the what happens if someone doesn't go into hypnosis blog link just there in the chat. Feel free to find that. We've had a few people go because we've just gone over the hour. So we may end up doing this again at some point, but as mentioned, this recording is going to be on our YouTube channel. We'll put it on the Hypnotic Learners Forum as well. Rory and touching. Sorry, I was reading the comments there. In the meantime, if you do have any more questions, if we've touched on something that you want to learn more about, feel free to post it in the Hypnotic Learners Forum. Anyone's welcome to join. If you're not on there already, just go onto Facebook, search for Hypnotic Learners, and you can join that. Loads of familiar faces from here will be there. Otherwise, as we mentioned earlier, some of you weren't here, our 50% off all of our online courses is going on until lockdown is over. Whenever that might be, waiting to hear back from the government, obviously. So it could be this week that it ends. It might be in another 3 weeks. We're not sure. But if you're planning on getting any courses, then take a look at hypnosis-courses.com and use the code STAYINDOORS, and you'll get 50% off all of our hypnotherapy online training. But otherwise, it's been lovely seeing you all. Thank you all for turning out and asking lots of awesome questions. And hopefully we'll see you again soon. Bye.
Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.